It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas here in the Moss Arts Center as we welcome you into the last 3304 kickoff and crossover show of 2023. Hello everybody, I'm Nels Williams, joined alongside my panelists Giovanni Heater, and for the first time, Cody Wagner. We'll be hearing from our reporters Will Lachlan, Carter Hill, Hayden Tolbert, Taylor Brettel, and Kendall Williams very shortly. But first, let's talk about these Christmas sweater guys. I love them, and I see yours even has a hood.
Yeah. Little hood back here for me. And Christmas tree is what I went with on the sweater. So
Yeah, I love it. Why not get a little bit into the Christmas theme here? We're into December, and it's going to be a fun one today for sure.
Spoiler alert, the rest of the reporters have wonderful Christmas sweaters on tap today. But first, let's get into what we got going on. Virginia Tech is going bowling for the first time in the Brent Pry era. Virginia Tech has made the Military Bowl. They're slated to play Tulane at the Naval Academy on December 27th. What are your initial thoughts and reactions to them making this bowl?
Yeah, I think when you look at this, there's just a little level of disappointment. You're so grateful to be at a bowl game. You have to hammer home that point. But because of how everything shook out, it's kind of the least caliber bowl game that Tech had a chance to be in. There was conversation of the Duke's Mayo Bowl in Charlotte, which would have been fun, playing inside an NFL stadium. You also had a chance to go out to El Paso and play in the Sun Bowl. The Fenway Bowl in Boston was on the table, and you end up going to Annapolis, but it's a great spot for Hokies, right? There's a lot of Virginia Tech alum in the D.C. area, very short drive, and this is a bowl that loves Virginia Tech, right? You have the Corps Cadet history here in Blacksburg and with the university. That's a big part of it with the Military Bowl, and they're just super stoked to have Virginia Tech be a part of it. Wouldn't you say, Cody?
yeah, a big thing for me though is just making it back into a bowl game. Virginia Tech had that string of 27 years where they went to a bowl game. That was snapped back after the 2019 season, and so they're looking to get back into things, and they're able to do it this season with Brent Pry, who really turned the season around, and it's greatly due to Tyler Bowen and that offensive unit. They did a great job turning things around midseason.
And for Virginia Tech, their opponent will be Tulane, but this is not the same Green Wave team that you look like on paper, right, who made the American Athletic Conference Championship 2 times in a row. Their head coach, Willie Fritz, bolted to take over the job at Houston, and they've also got a plethora of talent leaving the portal, Cody.
Yes, of course, they've got some talent leaving into the portal, but you look at this Tulane team, it's a very solid team across the board. It's not just the offense, it's not just the defense, it's not one player on the team. That's why they've been winning football games this season. And both teams that they lost to are ranked teams. So they've had a legit season so far, and they're going to try to carry that momentum in against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, you got a couple of big losses, right? Chris Brazzell, the second, he's your leading receiver, 44 catches on the year, 711 yards, as well as 5 total touchdowns. DJ Douglas, he's a stud cornerback. He enters the portal. He had 3 interceptions this year for the Green Wave. And then Carson Haggard, your backup quarterback. I think that could come into play here. The key for Tulane is Michael Pratt going to play in this ball game? He's the starting quarterback for the Green Wave. Chance that he could be like a 6th, 7th round guy in the NFL draft. Also a chance to stick around in college and maybe transfer and go play somewhere else. If he doesn't enter the portal or enter the draft and opt out, and he does play in this game, Tulane's got a really good chance. I think he's going to be the key, and it's something to look out for the next couple of weeks, guys.
And sticking with the portal, Virginia Tech also has a plethora of other players entering the portal. You got Daquan Wright, Bryce Duke, and even surprisingly, Derek Canteen. How big of an impact are these Tech transfers who are leaving?
Yeah, I think that Daquan Wright is a bit of a loss here on the offensive side. Really good pass-catching tight end. Struggled a little bit in the run block department when you look at some of the PFF grades, so maybe not as big of a loss. But coming into this year, that was a very young room. Now you need that room to step up a little bit more. It's going to be highlighted next season by Benji Gosnell. Nick Gallo still does have one more year of eligibility with a medical redshirt if he does want it. You kind of get that vibe. Maybe he's done with that part of his life, but it is certainly on the table for Virginia Tech. The bigger surprise here for me, though, was Derek Canteen. I mean, this is a lockdown defensive back for the Hokies. They got him out of the portal this past offseason, and he was huge. I think he wants to start. And this is a very, very deep defensive back and specifically cornerback room for Virginia Tech, especially if Mansour Delane and Dorian Strong do end up returning. And I think that's why you see Canteen leaving. Seem to absolutely love it here in Blacksburg. Can't blame the kid for wanting that opportunity to be a number 1 somewhere else, though.
And Gio, you mentioned a number of those players leaving Blacksburg, but what the transfer portal has now become, even with those losses, it's just like how they used to bring in freshmen. Of course, they still do that. The seniors leave, you bring in freshmen. But now it's guys transfer out, you bring these transfers in. And so, of course, as time goes along, we'll I'm sure we'll learn about transfers coming into Virginia Tech. So although some key pieces are leaving Virginia Tech, hopefully we'll get to see some key pieces coming in. And you even saw that this season with Kyron Drones becoming the starting quarterback, a transfer in from Baylor.
And one more thing to point out about the transfers, too, is the fact that a lot of them have indicated that they will play and they will stick around until Virginia Tech plays against Tulane before exiting the program. But for more on the Hokies who've entered the portal, here's Kendall Williams.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, but not the kind that involves Christmas carols and jingle bells. I'm talking about the transfer portal. And although the college football transfer portal reopened this past Monday, Brent Pry and his staff have been hard at work to make sure the rebuild in Blacksburg continues to grow into the 2024 season. After flipping over 41% of the roster last year through the portal, it's no secret that it was a big reason for Virginia Tech's success this year. And if you don't believe me, just listen to this. Up until week 10 of this season, when Stephen Gosnell scored his first points of the year at Boston College, every touchdown Virginia Tech offense scored was by a player that hadn't spent their previous season here in the maroon and orange. Pretty crazy, right? So if we look into 2024, where do Coach Bry and the Hokies stand, and what do they need coming out of the portal this year? Well, for starters, Nasir Peoples, Fladarius Payne, and Mario Kendricks have all exhausted their eligibility, which is a huge hit for the defensive line. But in better news, Josh Fuga and Antoine Powell-Ryland have already announced they will be returning for the Hokies next year. And although Dorian Strong hasn't made his official decision yet, he still has 1 year of eligibility remaining if he decides to stay home in Blacksburg. Derek Canteen has hit the portal, a somewhat unexpected decision from Hokies fans. But there are still holes to be filled in that ever-so-famous lunch pail D. Arguably one of the bigger targets for Virginia Tech is Youngstown State defender Alex Howard, who has 1 year of eligibility remaining. He is set to visit Blacksburg this Saturday after being offered by the staff on Monday, as soon as he hit the portal. There's also eyes on 2 defensive tackles hailing from ACC foe schools. Aeneas Peebles from Duke is set to visit this Saturday with 1 year remaining, and Florida State Ayobambi Tafasi has 3 years remaining. Although Tafasi has yet to set a date to visit, he's been said to love Blacksburg. He actually was highly recruited by the Hokies back in his high school days. Now, as we flip to the offense, the big news that Hokie fans could celebrate this week was quarterback Kyron Drones' announcement for his return next season. Daquan Wright, Bryce Duke, Dwayne Lofton, and Johnny Dixon on the other end all announced their decisions to depart Blacksburg throughout this week. Bayshaw Tootin, Ollie Jennings, and Jalen Lane's decisions are still pending, but it seems the biggest priority in the portal for transfers for Tyler Bowen's offense are for the offensive line. In fact, 15 of the 27 portal prospects for the Hokies are offensive linemen. Missouri's offensive guard E.J. Ndoma Agar will visit Blacksburg on Saturday, and Houston's offensive guard Tyler Johnson and offensive tackle Ruben Ujune will visit together on Monday. Each has 1 year of eligibility remaining. With a slew of visits lined up in just the next 4 days, it's an exciting time for Hokie Nation and the future of Hokies football. A 500 season, a date in Annapolis in a bowl game, and a bright future within the transfer portal, Hokie football fans have got the gifts this season that they've been asking for.
Thanks, Kendall. Now, before we get to Will's report on the Military Bowl, which it's pretty good, by the way, guys, Tech went 3-8 last season and found all sorts of ways to essentially hang the banner of worst in program history in almost all statistical categories, right? It wasn't great. But this year, they're 6-6. They're bowl eligible for the first time under the Brent Pry era. How much does making this bowl and being bowl eligible mean to this program?
You know, it's absolutely huge for Virginia Tech. I think a big way in which they turned their season around, you know, a 1-3 start was Tyler Bowen in the offense. They seemed completely changed when they came out for that Pitt game. The Syracuse game, they were firing on all cylinders, trick plays, and then some. And the offense for the rest of the season was kind of the story for Virginia Tech. And they even kind of left some wins on the table early in the season, Gio.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Cody. It was that offense revamping. And you talk about wins being left on the table, you just have to sit back and think, okay, what if it didn't take till week 4 and a 1-3 start to revamp the offense? Or what if they started with Kyron Drones out of the gate? We went no Grant Wells and you started with this from the get-go. Or there's also the scenario with, okay, what if you started with Kyron and you started with the original system and then you made the shift after maybe week 2, the first time Kyron ended up playing after week 2 and coming into week 3 against Rutgers. It just felt like things could have been done sooner. In the wins that you felt like you left on the table, you have to talk about, Rutgers is a tough one on the road. I don't know if Virginia Tech wins that one. That was a hostile environment, but Purdue at home. That was such a bizarre day with the longest weather delay in college football history. You can't go without talking about some games later. NC State, they were in that game towards the tail end of it. You let one get away on the road against Louisville. Now, Louisville's a very good team, but you kind of didn't get off the bus in that one. So it just felt like there was a chance maybe at more. Marshall in particular as well on the road early. So it's fun to look at it that way, but it's also a little disappointing. Maybe 8 or 9 was the ceiling rather than 6.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to look at the hypotheticals, though, because you also have to understand that Kyron Drones in the offseason, the coaching staff knew that he wasn't as good of a passer as he was compared to Grant Wells, right? And that's why they were hesitant to make the switch, is that Kyron Drones is very much more of a dual threat kind of running quarterback. But this season, or this offseason rather, we know he's returning. We know that the pieces are certainly in place for an 8 or 9 win season next year. But what does a win or a loss do for the Military Bowl? And how will that affect momentum depending on whether or not they win or lose for the Tech?
I think you have to win this game, but I don't think it's like detrimental. The reason I say you have to win it is because most of your dogs are going to play in this game, right? It seems like even the guys that are planning on transferring out are going to participate in the bowl game, and I think they've earned that, right? You were a part of the team for this season. You've earned the right to play in the bowl game. And then you got a lot of guys sticking around. Antoine Powell-Ryland announced that he's going to return for another season in Blacksburg. Kyron Drones is going to play. Like, you're going to have your weapons. You're going to have your team. And for that, you want to be able to carry that momentum into next season. That's why you have to win this. The season's not a scrap if you don't end up winning this. And Tulane's a good football team. They're ranked in the top 25 heading into their conference championship last week. Really, that's a team that's 1 win away from a New Year's Six Bowl. If Tulane wins in the American Conference Championship last week, they're playing Oregon instead of Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl. That's something to think about here. But I think if you're Virginia Tech, it'd be very, very solid to win this game, Cody.
And it's one thing for Virginia Tech if they have a lot of guys sitting out. You're like, okay, they had a lot of guys sitting out. A loss is fine. But you've got almost all your guys playing, as you mentioned, Gio. A win in this game is huge for the Hokies heading into the offseason to just signal to those potential incoming transfers and seniors in high school to be like, we are legit. We can win on this national stage in a bowl game to end our season on a winning season.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it would certainly be great for Brent Pry and company in terms of the resume and in terms of a win as well. But for a deeper dive on the Hokies' perspective on the Military Bowl, here's our very own Will Lachlan.
Bowl season is back in Blacksburg thanks to a Commonwealth Clash victory for Virginia Tech, in which the Hokies beat the Hoos down so bad that they turned their face a brighter shade of red, that is, than Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The 55-17 Hokie takeover of Charlottesville marked Tech's 6th win of the season, good enough to send the Hokies bowling for the 35th time overall in program history. Now, the setting for Virginia Tech's first bowl appearance in the Brent Pry era, you ask? The Military Bowl, a bowl that Tech's played in on 2 prior occasions, once in 2014 and another in 2018. And this time around, Virginia Tech, they won't be playing the Bearcats of Cincinnati, no. They'll be facing the 11-2 Tulane Green Wave out of the AAC Conference. Now look, it's been a while since these two teams have squared off. Back then, the BCS system was still nearly a decade away from its inception in 1989, and there definitely wasn't talk about any playoffs. Now, diving in a bit deeper, how did Virginia Tech get to this point, you ask? Well, it certainly wasn't playing in any nail-biters. Of the Hokies' 5 ACC wins, the closest margin of victory, 17 points. What this tells us about Virginia Tech is when their offense is hot, they're really tough to beat. The Hokies are 6-0 when scoring 30 points or more, and believe it or not, that's actually a stat that's equaled on the other end by Tulane. The Green Wave, they're no pushovers. They won a perfect 8-0 in the AAC, with a lone loss coming at number 11 Ole Miss, and in the AAC championship game to future ACC team, number 24 SMU. This game really boils down, though, to a strength-on-strength matchup on one side of the ball. Tulane allows under 100 yards rushing per contest, and they sport the top defense in their conference. Meanwhile, the Hokies, they're a dangerous team on the ground game, with Bayshal Tootin and Kyron Drones being big play threats anytime they pass the line of scrimmage. So at the end of the day, whichever team wins that side of the ball, they're going to have a good chance of taking home the Military Bowl trophy and ending their 2023 season on a high note. Guys?
Thanks, Will. Now let's turn our attention to the rest of college football as the 4 teams have been chosen for the playoff, but not without controversy. It's number 1 Michigan, number 2 Washington, number 3 Texas, and number 4 Alabama. What are our reactions and what are our thoughts on Florida State being left out of the college football playoff?
Well, for me personally, I think it's kind of ridiculous to leave Florida State out of the college football playoff. You see, for me, it's the product on the field. They didn't lose a single game, and when you look at it, football isn't necessarily the most beautiful game. It's played on the field between the tackles, and when you look at it, Florida State won football games, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I just think the committee made the right decision here. I understand you want to have the argument, the entertainment aspect of it, and the money left on the table. Look, the 4 best teams in college football right now are the 4 that are playing for the national championship. I think Georgia and Oregon are in that conversation. I think Florida State is absolutely in that conversation with Jordan Travis. But it says in the legal documents heading into the college football playoff that the committee can take into consideration coaches departing and players who will not be participating due to injury. That's exactly what they did here. Let's face it, Florida State is not the same team without Jordan Travis. They got some good quarterbacks back there, but it's just not the and you saw it against Louisville. Rodemaker didn't go. Third-string quarterback struggled. Low-scoring affair. Louisville's defense really had their way for most of the game, and Florida State's able to eke one out in the ACC championship. It's terrible for FSU. Don't get me wrong. Your heart goes out to them, and you ask the question, what more do you have to do? Right? It's kind of going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back with Florida State already wanting out of the ACC. Now that's probably really going to seal the deal as far as all that goes, and we can get into conference expansion and everything else at a later date. But I just think this was right to have the 4 best teams play for a national championship. Guys, did you want to see Michigan slaughter Florida State, or did you want to see a competitive semifinal? You got Michigan, Alabama, and then you get Washington, Texas. And the way it sets up, no matter what happens next year, you get a rematch if Michigan wins as well, because Michigan plays Texas and Michigan plays Alabama next season, so pretty cool.
It looks terrible because it's like they literally left out a 13-0 conference champion, right? But I don't believe Florida State would have even gotten past Michigan's 30 if they had played against Michigan as a number 4 spot. I get it. I understand Florida State's frustration, right? But the committee did the right thing. They chose it over an entertainment as well as quality of game value. I think last season they saw what happened between Georgia and TCU. Now, TCU deserved to be in that spot, right? They beat Michigan to get there. But they did not show up at all in the final itself, right? 65-7 was the final score.
Georgia was that good?
Yeah, Georgia was that good, right? But they saw that. They saw that on their national championship level, and they said, we're not going to have this happen again. And you mentioned it. In the fine print, a coach leaving or players who committed and contributed to the team's success who were unable to make it anymore, if they are out or if they leave, then that affects how they make the rankings or whatnot. Jordan Travis did that. Jordan Travis was a Heisman candidate before he got injured. In fact, he probably would have won the dang thing had he not gotten injured. Unfortunately, Florida State was not the same team as they were the number 4 team in the country against Louisville, and they didn't even look like a top 10 team against Louisville at all whatsoever. I think it was the right decision, but Cody, if you want to elaborate more, I get it. But me personally, I think they made the right choice in putting the Crimson Tide in.
Here's what both of you said, that they are picking the top 4 best teams. The thing is, we don't know who the best teams are until they play those football games. Oregon and Washington this past week, we saw it. Oregon were 10-point favorites by some sports books, and they end up losing that game to Washington. Washington looked very good in that game against Oregon. You just don't know, is my point. You don't know until you play those football games. And I think that having won every single game this season, they deserve to be in. And you look at things, of course, strength of record, it means nothing officially. But they are ranked 3rd in the nation according to that, and that takes everything into account. Go ahead,
let me go ahead and rebuttal to you there.
This is going to be good.
3rd in strength of record, sure. Who's right behind them at 4? Alabama. You look at strength of schedule. Number 5 in the country is Alabama. Florida State is all the way back at 55th. They played LSU. Sure, LSU has some losses. If you want to say that a big win is on the road against Florida in the Swamp, fine. Florida's not very good. I'm sorry. The Swamp's not an easy place to play. Of course, everybody gets up for rivalry week. I get it. But that's not a very impressive win to me. Florida's on par with a lot of the middle-of-the-tier ACC teams, in my opinion, that Florida State beat. I just don't – and then Louisville. I mean, Louisville is kind of similar to Texas beating Oklahoma State in their conference championship. Louisville doesn't jump off the page and say, hey, we're a top 8 team in the country. It's not like Washington beating Oregon or Alabama beating Georgia. Florida State's strength of schedule is nowhere near Alabama's. And then on the flip side of that as well, you look at what Alabama does have to offer. The strength of schedule is there, and then the fact that they just had more impressive wins recently, right? Beating Georgia, let's not forget, that's a team that won back-to-back national championships, were undefeated. And the craziest thing, and this is where I think we can all just agree and appreciate, is the fact that one game caused the defending national champs, #1 in the country, to fall from 1 to 6 due to one game. This was the most competitive race for a college football playoff we've ever seen, and the best part about it is it really pushes the envelope. We were already going to get a 12-team playoff next year, but it really pushes the envelope. This is why it is needed.
Yeah, it's unfortunate the last year of the college football playoff has to go out like this, and although there's rumors of Florida State potentially even boycotting, it's so clear and so obvious Mike Norvell and this team does not want to play in the Orange Bowl. But let's turn the page here. Great conversation, great debate. Let's turn the page here to the rest of the New York Six Bowls overall. You mentioned Oregon, 10-point favorites, whatever they were against Washington. Well, a loss nets you a game against number 23 Liberty. What are our thoughts on the Fiesta Bowl?
I think Oregon, it's a very easy game for them. I mean, Liberty is a solid team. They won every single game, but they have one of the worst strength of schedules in the nation. And so I just don't see them being able to get it done against Oregon.
Yeah, it's tough because you see Oregon as a team, and it's nobody's fault but their own, right? They had the opportunity. You beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship, or maybe even if you beat them earlier in the season when you played them. I think it was week 4 those two teams played in Seattle. You're in a different conversation here. But you have 2 losses, and you had your chance in the Pac-12 championship. Couldn't get it done against Washington. They were big favorites as well. 9.5-point favorites were the Ducks. But it's like, this is your consolation prize. I mean, look at all the other high-caliber Power 5 teams up there that we're going to talk about. Florida State, Georgia, Penn State, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Missouri. And you got Liberty. I mean, kind of a bummer for the Ducks. They should take care of business in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy on the fact that you had your chance against Washington twice, and you lose it, right? And then your consolation, like you said, it's against a group of 5 team, Liberty. But this should be a good matchup, though, in the Peach Bowl. We got number 10 Penn State versus number 11 Ole Miss. This feels like the bowl of teams that just can't get over the hump, right? They're constantly like dark horse contenders in the SEC and Big Ten. But then they just can't beat their rivals. What are our thoughts and opinions on the Peach Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, you said it, right? Penn State, you look at what they've done under James Franklin. It's like, okay, we're going to win every game, but we're never going to beat Ohio State and Michigan. No. And we might drop a dud to like Iowa in there as well. I mean, so close, yet so far. And Ole Miss, the same thing. I think Lane Kiffin's a great recruiter, pretty good coach. They've had their really good teams. They got a great quarterback in Jackson Dart. The cool thing is, in this matchup between Drew Aller and Jackson Dart, you're looking at 2 cats that could be in contention for the Heisman next season. So maybe a little bit of a preview there. 2 very young, very talented quarterbacks. I'm excited for this game, but I agree. It's like those two teams that are so close and top 10 caliber teams that just aren't quite at that playoff level.
Yeah, they both kind of have tough matchups in the regular season. They've got to take on 2 teams that are perennial top 5 contenders. For Penn State, it's Michigan and Ohio State. And then on the other side, Ole Miss, they had to play both Georgia and Alabama this year. That's an absolute gauntlet in conference. So they both play tough schedules. They're both battle-tested. We'll see what happens on the football field.
Now let's talk about 2 teams that are on the outside looking in. They kind of have their hand on the fence like, oh, man, I should be in this. We got the Cotton Bowl. Number 7 Ohio State versus number 9 Mizzou. Honestly, of the 4 New Year's Six Bowls overall besides the playoff, I have my eyes on this the most. What are your thoughts, Cody?
For me, it's more the Ohio State side of this that interests me. Mizzou, of course, is a solid team, but they dropped one to Alabama, and OSU is a much more solid team, in my opinion. Defensively, they're very good. And then, of course, you have the weapon in Marvin Harrison Jr., but they've struggled at the quarterback play. It's been Kyle McCord who really just hasn't been able to show that he is the guy in Columbus. So that's what they've struggled with all season for the Buckeyes.
Look, if you're Missouri, you're stoked, right? This is your Super Bowl. I mean, you hate to make comparisons. This is no secret. We go to school at Virginia Tech. If Tech was about to go play in a New Year's Six Bowl, I mean, this place would burn to the ground.
I think Sharkies would probably run out of liquor about an hour in.
Yeah.
An hour after it would be announced.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you're Missouri, like, yeah, we get to go play Ohio State. We're going to the Cotton Bowl. We get to go play at the Cowboys Stadium. This is a big deal, right, in Arlington. If you're Ohio State, maybe a little bit disappointed, and it's going to be weird for the Buckeyes. Kyle McCord's out, like Cody had mentioned. Marvin Harrison Jr., will he play in this game, right? Because he's an NFL draft prospect. So you don't know what the Buckeyes are going to look like. If I'm Missouri, though, I'm playing everybody. I'm throwing everything you got at that. Bring home the Cotton Bowl. Actually, like, if we're making picks, and I know we're going to do it later, like, I think Missouri might win this game because of who Ohio State won't put on the field.
Well, we'll save that for later.
Yeah.
But last but certainly not least, we talked about these two teams before. Can't really say much else about it. It's number 5 Florida State versus number 6 Georgia.
Yeah, it just feels like nobody wants to be there, right? If you saw any of the all-online press conferences, then they canceled the other media availability that they were going to have. So bizarre. Mike Norvell, Kirby Smart don't want to talk to the media. I get it. I mean, if you're Georgia, you got no one to blame but yourself. You had it in front of you to go undefeated. It's a shame that it takes one loss after being undefeated all year in the conference championship to be out of the playoff, but it's not like that opportunity wasn't there. If you're Florida State, what else you want, right? We talked about that, 13-0. So it does feel like they don't want to be there, but that's how it falls. And because of Florida State taking the Orange Bowl slot, it shook up everything else in the bowl rankings, which is why Tech fell all the way to the Military Bowl. You had a situation where Florida State's in the playoff, then Louisville's the team out of the ACC representing the conference in the Orange Bowl, and then everybody kind of moves up a tier. Instead, everybody fell down. It was quite the opposite.
Yeah, exactly as you mentioned there, Gio, the situation with the ACC. But in this game in particular, you mentioned the press conference. I got a chance to watch that between Mike Norvell and Kirby Smart, both very respectful of each other, both very caring for the separate situations that they're in. Of course, Georgia controlled their destiny in that game against Alabama, ultimately coming up short, and just a bad spot to be in for Mike Norvell and FSU. And they're just going to try to go into that game, and Mike Norvell has spoken. He said, hey, we're already not in the playoffs, so all we can do is hopefully go out and win this game against Georgia and prove that we are the real deal.
Yeah, it's like the college football playoff, and the NCAA kind of put like a get-along shirt over Florida State and Georgia, and they just kind of pushed them out there. But the fact that the press conference is being canceled has got me very interested in whether or not there are rumors that the Seminoles are going to boycott that bowl or not. We'll have to see. But did the committee get it right or wrong? Our reporter and columnist Carter Hill has very fiery opinions as well as the answer to that question.
Did the committee get it right? To be totally blunt, no, they didn't. There is no reason why Florida State should have been left out of the college football playoff. Why? Let's break it down. So here it is, the 2023 college football playoff. Michigan, that's correct. Washington, yep, that's right. Texas, okay, I can respect that. Alabama, my oh my. Sure, a one-loss SEC champion probably deserves to be in the mix to contend for a national championship, but no, not this year. The reason to leave out the 5th-ranked Seminoles of Florida State is absolutely criminal. An undefeated Power 5 conference champion should never be left outside of the picture, particularly when you look at Florida State's overall body of work. Yeah, I'm well aware Jordan Travis is done for the year, but guess what? It doesn't matter. A team should never be penalized for a season-ending injury. Everyone is acting like Florida State played a Liberty-type cupcake schedule to waltz to 13-0. Guess what? That's wrong. How about a double-digit victory over LSU? How about a win in the Swamp? How about a victory over a top 15 Louisville team with your 3rd-string quarterback? Ridiculously impressive. But no, the committee views that as a negative, I guess. When are the games going to matter? Why was the college football playoff not decided on the field? Why was Florida State the team on the chopping block? An undefeated Power 5 conference champion, a 12-1 SEC champion, and a 12-1 Big 12 champion that beat the SEC champion. It should have been easy. It was easy, but nope, the committee butchered it. And Florida State was the odd man out for whatever reason. Guys.
Thanks, Carter. Now let's flip the script to Virginia Tech hoops now. And after a sour and disappointing loss for the women against LSU, Virginia Tech dropped to number 15 in the AP poll. Is this a fair ranking for them to be at?
Yeah, I think this is where we expected them to be. Actually, last week I was on the panel alongside Raza Umarani. I think Braden was our host last week, and he asked us, where are they going to shake out? Is it going to be over or under 12.5, kind of setting a fun line there? And I said, I think they'd be right at 15. That's where the Hokies ended up landing, and it just makes sense, right? Not quite a top 10 team. 2 tough losses against very, very good teams, I will say, but I think the Hokies are at the right spot.
I agree with you, Gio. I think it makes sense. Of course, I believe that they're better than 15 in the nation, but what you've seen from them so far, I think 15 is a fair ranking.
Yeah, and the reason that they're at this ranking is because they didn't really perform well against superior squads. They're 0-2 against Quad 1 teams in Iowa and LSU, and they're not just Quad 1 teams. Those are some of the most premier teams in the nation. Are you concerned at all about how the Hokies performed on the national stage and in the spotlight?
A little nervous, yes. Totally concerned, I wouldn't say so yet, because they played Iowa very well. That's about as well as they could have played them. And then against LSU, it was a rough loss, but you're getting things dialed in. Of course, against LIU, that was a recovery game. You got to see Kayla King score much better from behind the arc, but a rough loss to LSU, and they're going to hopefully do better against these Quad 1 teams, as you mentioned.
Yeah, against Iowa, no. I didn't think there was like a panic button that we needed to hit. And then, we knew coming in, maybe they don't win either of these games. It would have been really nice to get at least one against Iowa or LSU. I think being on the road was a factor against the Tigers for sure. I think you get them away from Baton Rouge, things can be a little bit different. But I did see a little bit of cause for concern against LSU. It just felt like the Tigers were bigger, faster, stronger, more physical than Virginia Tech, no doubt. And then it just goes to show when the Hokies don't have a good shooting night. Hokies went 4-20 from beyond the arc against LSU and Baton Rouge. They don't really have many answers. And I think that was kind of where the cause for concern was. It was for the first time we saw, okay, you clearly don't have Deasia Gregg, Taylor Soule especially, and Kiana Traylor. Who's going to step up? And it just felt like the Georgia Liz show, and some of the other girls need to kind of elevate their game a little bit.
Well, a lot of girls did elevate their game, and it was a get-right game against LIU, the Sharks, on Wednesday. 98-50, it was a rout. It was expected. They were favored by about 50 points. What were your thoughts on Kenny Brooks and company's get-right game?
Yeah, I got the opportunity to call it with our own Braden Shank, of course, and they looked very impressive in that game. Of course, it's LIU. You expected the Hokies to win pretty handedly, 98-50 final. But Kayla King got going in that game. She was very impressive with 21 it was for King. And then also you saw Karis Baker off the bench, who looked very impressive with 18 points herself. Maybe she gets into that rotation a little more.
Yeah, I mean, you got what you should have against LIU if you're Virginia Tech, right? It was kind of like a practice, and the Sharks came in 1-7 on the year. But nevertheless, Tech did take advantage. A lot of unforced turnovers and unforced errors. If you're LIU, they had 16 first-half turnovers. I mean, that just already sets you ahead if you're Virginia Tech. But the biggest thing for me is, and you mentioned it, and I'll touch on it a little more, Cody, was seeing Kayla King see the ball go in the hoop, right? She's kind of been quiet throughout the first part of the year. You expect her to be a leader. She's one of the big three. She's one of the 3 returners here besides Carly Wenzel, who didn't play at all last year, right? She's a graduate senior for Virginia Tech. To see her make some shots and make a lot of them, right? She gets 7 3-pointers in this game. That was 2 away from a program high in a single game that she set herself in the season opener last year with 9 against Mount St. Mary's back in November of last season. To see her see the ball go in was huge. And then they set a program record in a single game for 3-pointers as well in a game with 17. Highest before that was 16. Hokies hit 17 as a team. And when you went 4-20 against LSU, that's a good way to get things moving back in the right direction.
Yeah, Kayla King really feels like she's warmed up, and she's kind of found a rhythm so far this season. But let's get a better look at Virginia Tech women's hoops with our reporter, Hayden Tolbert.
As our director of 3304 Sports, Nick Brown, once said, the Sharkies Classic is underway as the Virginia Tech Hokies take on the Radford Highlanders. The 15-ranked Hokies just came off a bounce-back win against the Long Island Sharks 98-50. Kayla King lit it up from the floor with 21 points in 33 minutes, and the dynamic duo of Georgia Amore and Liz Kitley combined 27 points on the night. VT hopes to get their 7th win of the season with only 2 losses against LSU and Iowa. As Coach Kenny Brooks quoted, saying, "We have become the Hunters very quickly. We lose 2 games and the media forgets us." Well, guys, if there is either the Hunters or the Hunted, Hokies hope to continue their win streak and climb the basketball rankings. Now, moving on to Radford, that is quite the opposite. The Highlanders have only won 2 games, those being against Concord and Western Carolina at the beginning of the season, having lost 7 straight games since their most recent loss against the Niagara Purple Eagles. Starters Tanya Hanner and Ashlyn Traylor Walker were the only players who surpassed double figures. Radford, as a team, shot 0 of 8 from three-point land. Radford lost the game 53-64. But watch out for Macy Rose, as she's shooting 52% from beyond the arc this season. So best believe she will want to step up for Radford. Now, these schools both love the food at Sharky's, but they will have to settle their differences on the basketball court with the odds in the Hokies' favor, as they're undefeated at home so far this season. But never fear, the Highlanders are here, and they hope to get the big upset against the Fighting Gobblers this.
Thanks, Hayden. Let's switch over to the other hoop squad in action in Blacksburg, the men's team. Right now, coming off losses to FAU and Auburn, Virginia Tech got back into the win column on Sunday against Louisville. They're starting 1-0 in the ACC. What are your thoughts against the Cardinals?
I think the biggest thing is MJ Collins, right? Very similar to how we talked about Kayla King and her struggles early on. MJ Collins had a lot of those same struggles in the month of November, not against the Cards. 20 points for MJ, 3 of 3 from beyond the arc, 7 of 7 from the free throw line, had 4 assists and 4 rebounds as well. But the Hokies still shot 5 of 20 from 3 as a team. For whatever reason, they are struggling to hit from three-point land. But, they showed some resilience. They trailed in the first half, were able to fight their way back, Cody.
It's the front court that's been there all year for the Hokies in Lynn Kidd. And you know who I think the unsung hero for this team is off the bench? Malijal Poteet.
Yeah.
He's played very solid for the Hokies, gathering rebounds, scoring points. He's been a solid option off the bench.
And Gio, you mentioned it. You touched on it. MJ Collins finally broke out like many were expecting him to. 20 points, 3 three-pointers made, and 4 assists. Are we starting to see the sophomore come out of his shell and really mold into the player that Mike Young and company are expecting him to?
Yeah, Mike Young talked about it last night at Tech Talk Live. Cody and I were listening, and, he talked about how, he put it very bluntly, MJ was in a dark place. It's tough to be in a shooting struggle, and that doesn't, mean to sound dramatic there, but those were the words that Mike Young used because he was really struggling to score the basketball in the month of November, and he just thinks that game was so big for his confidence, right? Sometimes you just see a couple of shots go in, then all of a sudden you turn into a different player. Have to emphasize the fact that the reason MJ was still on the floor a lot for Virginia Tech was because what he brings to the table defensively. He's a better defender than Tyler Nickel, which is why MJ was still playing big minutes for Virginia Tech, and then eventually that offensive side is going to come around. If that's what we're seeing here, you're looking at a really, really big weapon for the Hokies. If you can be that good on defense, but also be a big threat offensively, MJ's got a lot of potential.
And Gio, I think there's something to be said for last game against Louisville. He came off the bench. Maybe a little less pressure on MJ is what did it for him. A big performance for him. And if you can get even one of those 3 guards you're looking to for points, MJ Collins, Sean Padula, and Hunter Couture, one of the 3 of them to have a decent outing every game out, then you could have a pretty solid season if you could get good production from one of those 3.
Yeah, worth noting too, Nels, that MJ was a little banged up. Didn't play against Auburn, got hurt, lower body injury against FAU. They sat him out in the Plains against Auburn, and then he returned against Louisville.
Well, one guard that Virginia Tech has certainly relied on for points this season is Sean Padula, and he's continued to struggle. Since Iowa State 3 games ago, he has not made a three-pointer. He's gone 0 for 9, and total from the floor, he's 7 for 31. Are there any concerns with how the junior guard has been playing in these past few games?
Certainly some concerns. He's really struggled from the field. Against South Carolina early this season, he looked like he was going to be the guy. He was going to be the scoring option for the Hokies, but since he's really struggled, and you just got to find a way to get him going, get the offense going really, because you're relying on him and Hunter Couture largely for offensive production, and they just really haven't lived up to that hype so far this season.
Listen, Sean's a good player, right? We know that. We've seen that, right? He was really good last season for Virginia Tech. I think this is kind of a Brent Pry moment, right? We just got to trust the process, right? That's what Brent Pry always hammers home with the Hokies. I think this is the situation here. He's a good player. He's going to come around. Even the best hitters in the world go through hitting slumps when you want to talk baseball, right? Shooting slumps are certainly a thing. Sean's going to come around. He's still facilitated the offense well, and it's given Rex Steiner some opportunities off the bench.
Yeah, a perfect get-right game. Virginia Tech women's basketball had it against LIU Wednesday. Virginia Tech men's, they take on Valparaiso on Saturday. But for one final peek at basketball in Blacksburg before Christmas break, Taylor Brettles got us covered. Taylor?
The Virginia Tech Hokies got their first taste of ACC basketball play this year, this past Sunday against the Louisville Cardinals. Even with the Hokies being favored by 14 points, and being at home, conference play is never easy. The Cardinals got out to a strong lead, and by the first media timeout, they led 10-2. But the Hokies bounced back, tying the game at 16 apiece just 6 minutes later. This game was like watching a ping pong match, with it going back and forth and back and forth. By half, the game was tightly knit, just like the sweater, with the Cardinals leading by just one, 31-30. But going into the second half, it was Virginia Tech sophomore guard MJ Collins coming off the bench and taking over. He had 20 points in the game and went 7 for 7 from the free throw line. He wasn't the only Hokie to go 100% from the line, however, as Hunter Couture went 5 for 5 himself. The Hokies shot 81% from the line, going 22 of 27 overall, which heavily contributed to their high-scoring second half. Between Collins' 20-point performance and Lynn Kidd's amazing day from the field, tacking on 19 himself, the Hokies ran away with it and ending the game with a 75-68 victory. Virginia Tech stands first in the conference, tied along with 7 other teams. Now, there is a long way to go, but it's always great to see a good start to the season. Their next game will be at Castle Coliseum tomorrow at noon against Valparaiso, where they look to get on a 7-3 start. Guys?
Thanks, Taylor. Now, guys, you know the deal. Let's wrap things up with our predictions for the New Year's Six Bowl game, as well as Virginia Tech versus Tulane. Let's start Fiesta. Number 8, Oregon versus number 23, Liberty.
Gotta go Oregon.
Me as well. Oregon for me.
Yeah, that's a quick one. We can get over with first. Orange Bowl. Number 5, FSU versus number 6, Georgia.
I've got FSU personally. I know Georgia is a great football team. They were number 1 ranked in the nation. And my heart tells me FSU. My mind tells me Georgia. I'm going with my heart.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go with Cody on this one. I think it's a situation where there's gonna be a different fire underneath Florida State here. Mike Norvell's a really, really good coach. He just won ACC Coach of the Year for a reason. They're going to be passionate going into this ball game. They want to prove and make a statement that they belonged in the college football playoff. What better way to do that than take down the 2-time reigning defending national champions in Georgia, right? So even without Jordan Travis, I want to take FSU in a close one.
If FSU wins, like you said, they proved that they should have been there. But if they lose, that kind of seals the narrative that it should have been Alabama over. So it's a massive needed win for the Seminoles. But Peach Bowl, number 10 Penn State versus number 11 Ole Miss.
I'm going to have to go with Ole Miss in this one because I think this could be a high-scoring affair. Penn State really good on defense, but I think that if it does get to a shootout, which it could, Ole Miss I like to be able to score more than Penn State. I think it's a high-scoring affair, and Dart really shows off.
Once again, Gio, you must be reading my mind because I completely agree with you. I think it's going to end up being a high-scoring game, a high-powered offense for Ole Miss, and I think they're going to be able to put points up, and I think that's what's going to do it for them.
Penn State's got a stout defense, but I think that Ole Miss barely squeaks by in like a 16-13 just scoreagami, like what the heck was this game kind of deal. I really think that way. Like I said, these are two teams that just can't really get over the hump.
Yeah.
And I just feel like this is just a perfect storm for just some craziness to happen in the Peach Bowl. Cotton Bowl, though. Number 7 Ohio State versus number 9 Mizzou.
You know, I've thought about this one a lot. What you've said earlier, it does make you think Ohio State, they aren't going to necessarily have their best roster, if you will, coming into this game against Mizzou because they're going to be losing some transfers potentially who will sit out, and then some guys who will just sit out for the draft. Like, we don't even know if Marvin Harrison's going to play in that game. So for me, I'm still going to go Ohio State because I think they're the better football team. But I could see this game going either way.
Yeah, I think that Ohio State is the better football team, and I agree with you there. With that being said, I think a lot of their guys aren't going to play, kind of the same points you brought home. And I also think that Missouri is going to have a little bit of a different edge to them. I mean, they haven't necessarily been to this stage before. This is exciting. This is a really big deal for Mizzou. I like the Tigers in a close one. Would be a fun upset in the Cotton Bowl.
Ohio State's acting like they've been there before, while Mizzou's like, hey, we're going to Dallas. You know what I mean? Like, it's time to party.
I think Ohio State's still disappointed, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you beat Michigan, you're in the Big Ten championship, and at that point, you're going to the college football playoff, right? I think anybody was going to beat Iowa, even though their defense is really, really good. The Hawkeyes don't score any points. So I think if you're Ohio State, you were one win away from being in the playoff yourself. That's a place they're used to being. They were there last year. They've been there more than any other team besides, I want to say, Clemson and Alabama, or just as many times. So for them, the Cotton Bowl and being number 7 in the country isn't standard. I like Missouri.
Last one for the day, we have Virginia Tech taking on Tulane in the Military Bowl. Who do you guys got?
Well, it pains me completely to say, I have to go with Tulane. Wow. Just from a pure football perspective, they're 11-2 on the season. They had a very solid regular season of play. Of course, they lost in the conference championship to SMU, but only 2 losses on the season, and both to ranked opponents. Virginia Tech has shown that they've struggled, even against a team like NC State. So I think that the Tulane will get the better of them, but I think that we'll get a chance to see Virginia Tech's high-powered offense, but I think it's going to be tough against this number 19th ranked defensively Tulane defense.
Tulane's good, like, don't get me wrong. And I think that if their quarterback plays, things get really interesting, but I think they're losing a lot. They're also going through a head coaching change, which changes everything, and I think the Hokies have, they just essentially extend the season by a month, go through the normal course of action. Everybody seems to be sticking around. That's important. For the most part, you're really not losing much. Yes, Daquan Wright, Derek Canteen, but it could be certainly worse. And I just think this is a game where Virginia Tech wants to make a statement like, hey, we're moving in the right direction. I got the Hokies, and I actually got the Hokies big in this one. I think it's kind of like when they played Wake Forest or Syracuse or Pitt. Everyone was like, oh, we could see a rock fight type of thing, and the Hokies just, boom, come out offensively swinging. You got a month to prep. There's going to be some interesting trick plays in Annapolis.
A lot of time between December 27th when Virginia Tech trucks on up to Annapolis to take on Tulane in the Military Bowl, and I think, like you said, it comes down to the transfers. But that'll do it from us here in room 153 of the Moss Art Center for this week's edition of our 3304 crossover show. We'll have coverage of almost every men's and women's basketball game over winter break, as well as boots on the ground at the Naval Academy come December 27th. But for now, thank you Will Lachlan, Carter Hill, Hayden Tolbert, Kendall Williams, and Taylor Brettel for contributing such fantastic reports. Cody Wagner, great job on the panel today, buddy, for the first time. And Giovanni Heater for joining me, and for the entire production crew behind those cameras for making this show possible. For one last time in 2023, I'm Nels Williams. On behalf of all of us at 3304 Sports, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. Enjoy the winter break, Hokie students, and have a great New Year. We'll see you next time in January.